Our guest today ran LinkedIn's biggest business before he ran LinkedIn.
I joined LinkedIn with the expectation of being there for a few years, like most people do when they enter into a new company, and I just never wanted to leave. LinkedIn, when I first joined, had a very small business in helping companies hire, and we were able to grow that to a market-leading business. But there's a difference between knowing you have a problem to solve for customers and solving it in the biggest way possible and growing the business. That's what running a unit is like. But being a CEO starts with what problems are worth solving.
And now he's CEO of the hiring economy's most prominent platform, even as artificial intelligence comes for the very jobs that his platform lives on. Or does it?
The core question that LinkedIn needs to answer is, how do we help people all over the world navigate what is clearly becoming one of the most dynamic and uncertain times in people's careers as AI finds its way into the economy? We're seeing more AI-oriented jobs being created than ever before. So there's a 50% increase in engineering roles specifically built around AI. There's been a tripling over the last decade in the amount of jobs associated with building data centers in India. One of the statistics that we've recently seen is that every job, the skills required to do that job are changing by 12% every year. People putting founder on their profile is up roughly 50% year on year globally, and it's double that rate in India. And we are deploying a number of features that are going to allow us to limit the AI slop on the platform. I think you're going to see agentic tools across a number of use cases on LinkedIn.
Well, Dan Shapiro would be betting on LinkedIn not just surviving the AI wave, but leading it.
Listen on, it's Monday, the 10th of August. I'm Anirban Chaudhary. This is Corner Office Conversation.
Hi, Dan. Very warm welcome to Corner Office Conversation.
So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Lovely. Pleasure's ours, Dan. Okay, let's start with your journey. I mean, you've been somewhat of a LinkedIn lifer. You've spent 10 years climbing the ranks from GM to COO before you took on as the CEO. When I was reading up on you, one thing that struck me was a piece of wisdom that the former CEO, Jeff Weiner, gave you a few years back. It was quite early on that he told you that if you want to run a tech company, you needed to understand product and not just sales. That and other briefs, lessons from the last few years, what are you using in your stint as the CEO of LinkedIn?
Well, first of all, I think it's very funny to me that I'm very accurately described as a LinkedIn lifer. I've been at LinkedIn for 18 years, but when I was in university, I was a startup kid. I always thought that I would be one of these entrepreneurs that starts company after company. That was always my vision for myself. And I started my first company when I was 19. But there's something funny that happens when you join a company that speaks to you, that something about what the company does is very meaningful, and the people and the problems. I joined LinkedIn with the expectation of being there for a few years, like most people do when they enter into a new company. And I just never wanted to leave. But to your question, I think it was a really important and wise piece of advice for me. It is absolutely true that every company needs a different kind of CEO. There is no one universal playbook for being a CEO. You really have to answer the question for what kind of organization. And I think what Jeff was sharing with me was that the core center of creating value in the world as LinkedIn is helping create economic opportunity for every professional in the world. And if you want to do that, if you want to be able to lead an organization that is really centered on creating value for 1 billion people around the world, you need to understand product. You need to understand technology. And there's no shortcut to that than doing the work yourself. So, at that moment that he shared that advice with me, I had been working more with customers. And I made a complete pivot, and I started at the bottom as an individual contributor. I think when I was in the sales team, I ran a team of over 1,500 people, and I went from that to being by myself as an individual contributor on the product side. And I learned firsthand what it means to build a great product. And I think that experience has been invaluable in preparing for this moment, because as we look forward, the core question that LinkedIn needs to answer is, how do we help people all over the world navigate what is clearly becoming one of the most dynamic and uncertain times in people's careers as AI finds its way into the economy? Everyone's asking, how do I think about my career differently? How do I think about my job differently? And the experience that I built at Jep's Advice has been a huge part of that for me.
Dan, you've scaled LinkedIn's hiring unit, which is the talent solutions unit, from roughly about 50 million to $1.5 billion in bookings. Now, this is huge, and it's become, I think, LinkedIn's biggest revenue spinner. So, can you tell us a little bit about what the difference has been really between, say, growing a business unit versus running a whole company? What has been the difference for you?
It's very different, and I think it's a great question. So, I think it starts with the idea that if you want to build a great business, you need to solve a big problem that people have. And it's true. LinkedIn, when I first joined, had a very small business in helping companies hire. And we were able to grow that to a market leading business in helping companies hire. And we continue to do that. In fact, we just launched one of our most innovative products in history called Hiring Assistant, where companies can hire using AI to make that next great person for their organization. But there's a difference between knowing you have a problem to solve for customers and solving it in the biggest way possible and growing the business. That's what running a unit is like. But being a CEO starts with, what problems are worth solving? Of all the problems in the world that LinkedIn could solve for people, which ones are we going to invest our time and effort? And how do we make sure that we have the right people and infrastructure and culture to solve each of those problems? So when I was running talent solutions, it was very much around, how do I help companies hire? And as CEO, it's more looking across the entire landscape and deciding which problems LinkedIn's going to devote its time and attention to. And the problems keep changing. What it meant to lead an organization 15 years ago is very different than what it means now. What it means to navigate a career 15 years ago is very different than it is now.
Right. Dan, let's come to what you started the answer with, which is AI. It's an upheaval and an overhaul for the market that is LinkedIn's core. There are shifting fears. I mean, the large overarching set of fears is that it'll snatch jobs. The other set of fears is that companies are already overspending on AI. What makes you happy about AI, and what worries you?
Well, I think you're right. It's an incredibly powerful piece of technology. And every time there's a new piece of technology, it begs the question, what opportunities does it unlock? What challenges does it create? And I think that, just maybe to create a little bit of clarity, because we sit on the world's best data set about what's going on in the labor market. And if you look at what's going on with hiring right now, hiring is slower today than it was before the pandemic, but it does not appear to be driven by AI. It appears to be driven by global interest rates. And so while any individual may feel like perhaps their job prospects feel different than they did a few years ago, that is probably true. That's an authentic feeling. It does not appear to be AI that's doing that. In fact, we're seeing more AI-oriented jobs being created than ever before. So there's a 50% increase in engineering roles specifically built around AI in the last decade. There's been and that's in India. There's been a tripling over the last decade in the amount of jobs associated with building data centers in India. And so there's a lot of opportunity being created, but it does beg the question, what does it mean for people's careers? Because the thing that we see is that every single job on the platform, the way that job is done is getting reinvented with AI. So even if the job title is not changing, the skills underneath the job are changing. In fact, one of the statistics that we've recently seen is that every job, the skills required to do that job are changing by 12% every year.
How do you quantify that, the change?
If you look at what jobs are posted on the platform, you can understand what kind of skills are required to get those jobs. And so even if your title may not be changing, your job is changing. I think that is absolutely the case. For us, we see AI as a way to solve more problems, to create more value for customers. But it is going to take a lot of change for individuals and companies to adapt. And I think the people that are thriving right now are those that are welcoming that change. And I think the people that are scared of that change and perhaps avoiding that change, that's where I think the greatest risk is.
Can you give our viewers and listeners a sense of what are the kind of roles that you're seeing that are gaining a lot of traction? Maybe new roles that are emerging, new sectors that are really looking out for talent. What should people really look out for today?
It's a great question. So I think, as I mentioned, AI is creating many jobs in India specifically. I think there are a number of other trends. So one trend is that US companies are doing more of their R&D hiring in India. So if you look at it in 2019, about 20% of US company R&D hiring was in India. Now it's 41%. Another trend that we're seeing globally is a trend towards more people being founders. So people putting founder on their profile is up roughly 50% year on year globally, and it's double that rate in India. So almost 100% or more than 100% growth in India, people embracing being a founder. And I think it's not a coincidence that that's happening at the same time that AI is becoming so prevalent, because AI allows people to do more on their own, right? They feel like they can access the technology to do a broader range of skills, accomplish more work. And that may mean starting a company or operating with a small group of people to do things that historically only a bigger company could have done. So we're seeing a continued trend towards R&D in India, but we're also seeing a trend towards small business and more people being founders.
A basic question: how is the Indian professional navigating LinkedIn, and how is it different from the way they used to, say, 5 years back? And how is it different from, say, a US professional does it?
Well, I think there are two trends that come to mind. I think the first trend, and this is a global trend, is that there's just more changing in people's jobs than ever before. And they're trying to turn to platforms like LinkedIn to make sense of all of the news. And increasingly, they're turning to creators to be that trusted voice. You know, this piece of news happened yesterday. What does it mean for me? And they're often listening to people who every day are showing up on platforms like LinkedIn trying to explain all of the change happening in the world. So we're seeing a rise in content consumption, and we're seeing a rise in trust going towards creators in the professional landscape. So I think that's one big trend. I think the other big trend is that AI has making it easier for people to embellish their accomplishments. When people apply to jobs, they'll go to AI and they'll say, write me a resume for this job. And it's getting harder and harder for employers to determine which credentials are accurate and which ones are embellishments. And so one of the things that we're really investing in is a layer of verification across LinkedIn. So we started with just profile verification. Is this person real? And we have over 100 million people globally on LinkedIn that are using LinkedIn to verify themselves. But we're now moving into skill verification. So we launched this product called Connected Apps, where any member can connect their profile to software they use to do their job. And that piece of software can indicate that this is a person that understands these parts of my product. It's a top 10% user. And oftentimes companies hire not just for skills, but for people that use and are proficient with certain tools. So we're trying to make sure that we can be this trusted layer to allow people that are truly talented in a particular area to be visible to employers. So I would say these two trends are quite strong. The trend towards making sense of all of the news that people are experiencing day to day, and the ability to have a credible, trustworthy source of your skills so that employers can focus on the right people.
God. Are you aware that a lot of people refer to LinkedIn now as the Instagram for professionals? There's a huge explosion of videos, pictures, etc., that speak much more about a person's profile and what they're doing more than text used to. Is LinkedIn sort of aware of this, and is that a way sort of you're rebuilding the website for it to be more content oriented, albeit professional content?
We think content is a huge part of our strategy and how people should use LinkedIn. So content consumption is up 10% year on year. Engagement with comments is up 18% year on year. And we think that's absolutely going to continue. And part back to this trend of there's just so much going on in the world of work that people are trying to make sense of, and they're turning to LinkedIn for that. Now, I think you could ask a question, what's the kind of content that we want on LinkedIn? And we want content that has a mix of insight and personality. That's the magic formula. That could be about a news story that some company in my space just released earnings, or it could be about a more office culture trend of how people are teaming with their colleagues. So there's a wide range of professionally oriented topics that we think have a natural space on LinkedIn, but it really is about the workplace. It's about professional. And we think that there's a range of formats that make sense for that. Sometimes it could be video, but in other cases, text is more efficient to communicate a message. It's really about what's natural for the creator and what makes sense for the topic.
Just as an extension of Anirban's question, because, like, for instance, I'm addicted to the puzzles. I get the puzzles every day and I make sure to, I need to check. And I'm always so disappointed because it says, like, you finished this puzzle in 29 seconds and then someone else has finished it in like 5 seconds. So it's the most disappointing thing. I mean, what else are you working on? Anything that you can tell us about, that kind of attest to what you've said earlier about the platform being this all-inclusive sort of place for professional development?
Yeah, I mean, the games are fun. I personally play the games. I think I'm at a 450-day streak on Zip, which is my favorite game. So I play Zip, I play Patches. The new word game called Wend is quite good. There are millions and millions of people that play games every morning on LinkedIn. I think you're going to see a lot more from us in the content space, and you're going to see a lot more from us in helping members find jobs and represent themselves credibly. I did an announcement last week around us acknowledging the fact that there is content on the feed that is quote unquote AI slop, right? Sort of more generic AI generated content. And we are deploying a number of features that are going to allow us to limit the AI slop on the platform, because we want the content to be great. We want it to have authenticity and personality. So we're giving members the ability to flag when they think something is AI slop, and that'll allow us to train our models and to give feedback to creators that what they're trying to put out into the world may not be received the way they intended.
Right. Dan, let me double click a little bit on LinkedIn and its usage of AI. Now, I'm just reading through the notes. The company just crossed $4.83 billion in quarterly revenue, which is a 12% growth year on year. In fact, Satya Nadella, who's the chief of Microsoft, which owns LinkedIn, specifically mentioned that Agentic AI hiring tools surpassed $450 million annualized run rate. Tell me about the future impact of AI agentic tools on your business.
I think you're going to see agentic tools across a number of use cases on LinkedIn. Finding a job, growing a business, but the one that you mentioned is around hiring. And when we've analyzed how hiring happens for a recruiter, about half the time they spend with candidates and the other half the time they spend with administrative work. It
Right.
could be reviewing applications. It could be paperwork. It could be sitting down with a hiring manager to understand what skills they're hiring for. But the part of the job that's really about recruiting is the time with candidates. And what we realize is that we can build technology that helps simplify the more administrative parts of the job that are lower value. So that's what this product is. It's called Hiring Assistant. We launched it less than 12 months ago. It is growing incredibly quickly. We already crossed $450 million in run rate, as you described, and continues to grow fast. And it is incredibly valuable. As you mentioned earlier, everyone that's buying AI tools is asking, what's the ROI on my AI investment? And this product is really delivering for recruiting teams to help them hire faster and higher quality people at an effective cost. So we think that's going to only continue. And I think that you will see more and more roles in the world where some product really figures out how to simplify the job down to the most high value tasks. And we have done that in recruiting. And we expect that business to continue to grow. And as you mentioned, LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. Satya is amazing, and I think we were one of the early decisions in his tenure as CEO to acquire LinkedIn, and it is going down as one of the top 5 tech acquisitions of all time.
Right, fantastic. Now, I have a rookie question from your answer. Are we looking at a future when it's, AI agents talking to AI agents on a large part of the admin work that goes into hiring? I mean, AI agents in LinkedIn talking to the AI agents in prospective employers. Are we looking at that kind of a relationship taking over a large chunk of the admin work in the near future in the job market?
Well, I think it really depends on the specific workflow. So I think you absolutely could imagine that a recruiter has an AI agent that is helping it review applicants. Okay. And I think you could also imagine a world where a job seeker has a career agent that is helping it prepare its job search and is helping it find jobs that might meet your skills. Now, the question that you asked is, could the career agent talk to the recruiter's agent to say, should we apply to your job? It looks like I have the skills for this job, but is this really a good application? And I think better matching between the applicant and the job is better for both parties, because people don't want to spend time applying to jobs they're not a good fit for, and recruiters don't want people applying that have no chance in the job. And a lot of recruiters are facing huge growth in the number of applications to their jobs. They can't possibly go through them all. So higher quality matchmaking in job seeking, I think, is a big part of what's possible.
Dan, can you tell me what really differentiates you from, say, a Claude Cowork, right? Because Claude Cowork can also research candidates, manage outreach, it can also manage workflows. How does LinkedIn look to, get that edge over other, tools that are available?
I think for job seekers, if you want to use that as an example, finding the jobs that are open is not the hard part anymore on the internet. There are lots of ways to figure out what jobs are open. The hard part is figuring out how to actually talk to someone that can help you get the job. And that has much more to do with people. And I think LinkedIn has always been a platform for people and connections. And how do you take the relationships you have and use that to open up opportunity, perhaps even to see opportunities that you never searched for in the first place. And I think that there will be many ways on the internet to search for what jobs are available, but we will be the platform to get the jobs that you're actually interested in.
Right. What would your advice be to a young professional today who wants to use LinkedIn to its fullest potential?
I would start with using LinkedIn to learn what's going on in your industry and start the practice of commenting or sharing your own thoughts, because there is so much happening. And, as someone that leads a large organization, I notice when certain employees comment and share insightful things, and it helps build my own perspective. So I think it's hard to understate how much you can learn and then how much you can contribute. I think the second thing I would do is build a rich profile and try to attach it to examples of your work. Because it's one thing to say that you've done a job, it's another to see the work product that you've produced, if it's appropriate with your employer. But that really gives me a sense of what you're capable of. And then the third thing is use it to build relationships. And I don't mean connect with everyone that you possibly can find. I mean that there are people you've done real work with, and using LinkedIn to stay in touch with them, to see what they're doing, to build your network that way, I think can be very, very powerful. And, maybe play the games every morning too, because that's fun.
Right.
I know the SMB market is something that LinkedIn is really strong in India specifically. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of traction you're seeing in the SMB market specifically? Because large clients we already know you work with actively, but what is the potential for growth in the SMB market in India specifically?
I think the SMB market is grown by leaps and bounds. I believe that hiring from small businesses on LinkedIn is up over 250% in the last few years. It's a huge growth. And I think it speaks to the fact that years ago, LinkedIn was much more of a multinational centric network in India, and then eventually became part of, the Indian conglomerate community showed up on LinkedIn. And more recently, it's become much more about small businesses and startups and all those parts of the economy participating together. So I think LinkedIn has been a very successful place for small businesses to build credibility. I think one of the things when you're a small business you try to do is to appear bigger than you are. And one of the ways you can do that is by sharing insightful information, by building a following, by participating in conversations on the platform. And so I see more and more entrepreneurs using LinkedIn as a platform to build credibility. And I think that we're also seeing that startups can do more with AI that makes them act like mid-market companies. So I think you will see more smaller businesses thriving, particularly in markets like India, but it's a trend that we are absolutely seeing on the platform.
One final one from me, Dan. I'm very curious to understand, as far as content sharing on LinkedIn goes, or LinkedIn as a platform for content sharing and networking, how have you managed to keep that platform more apolitical than we see other platforms? I mean, are there inbuilt filters, etc., or is this just the intent of the professionals that use the platform? We haven't seen, statements that can, or posts that can really land people into trouble. I mean, LinkedIn has been really quote unquote safe that way. Is this a deliberate sort of structure that you have in place, or is it just happening?
We want LinkedIn to stay LinkedIn. And for us, that's about it being a safe, trusted, professional platform. And one of the things that's always been part of LinkedIn is that you use your real name. And when you have to use your real name and the people that you're sharing content with tend to be the people you work with, I think you think differently about what you're going to share. You do it more constructively. You do it on topics that feel appropriate for a work conversation. And I think that tends to orient the conversation around things that are happening in your industry, things that are happening in your function. And we love that. That's the kind of content that we want on the platform. That's the kind of content that we believe unlocks economic opportunity for people, helps them stay up to date, helps them learn skills. So I think the intention of the platform is very deliberate. And I think the use of real names makes a big difference.
Right. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
Thank
you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
having
much.
me. I really enjoyed it.
That's it for today. You were listening to Corner Office Conversation, a podcast where we talk to the most interesting business and thought leaders from India and the world. This episode was produced by me and Rajas Naik, sound designed by Amrit Reggie. Keep following our podcasts on your favorite platforms. Stay tuned.